Chapter 32. Lollypop. What kind of trap is this supposed to be? Angelique questioned, her voice laced with skepticism, her brow raised at Marx's creation. It seemed so elementary, so rudimentary, it was almost insulting. The device before her was a testament to simplicity, so primitive that it seemed a creation that a caveman could have concocted. Mark had essentially fastened a landmine to a stick. The simplicity underwhelmed her, leaving her questioning the effectiveness of such a device. It's just a landmine on a stick, Mark. Is this really the best we can do? Angelique's words weren't meant to scorn, but to spur further innovation, to push the limits of their ingenuity in this dire time. She knew the value of every mind around her, and she believed in the power of human innovation when backs were against the wall. Angelique scrutinized the device, her mind whirring to visualize its deployment. How could such a simple contraption halt a transport? It's not like they could carve a hole into the solid rock for the Chinese transport to run over. Any attempt to conceal it would be glaringly obvious on the seamless surface. And then there's the reliance on chance, merely hoping they'd run over it. Mark chuckled, catching the hint of her skepticism. Never egged a car on the highway, have you? Angelique blinked at him, confusion threading her tone. No. Why would I ever do that? Mark's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief as he began to elaborate on his seemingly simplistic design. Well, you see, it's not about having them run over it. It's about the element of surprise. This, he gestured to his invention, can create a level of distraction that can stop them in their tracks, or shortly after depending on how fast they are moving. Angelique listened, her intrigue piqued, yet the skepticism lingered, etched on her face, daring Mark to convince her fully of the efficacy of his prehistoric innovation. Mark continued, his voice vibrant with reminiscence. Look, my upbringing was unique. We had chickens, and my brothers and we'd head to the overpass and launch eggs at unsuspecting cars, aiming squarely for the windshield. He paused to scan Angelique and Katie's incredulous faces, eyebrows raised in synchronized disbelief. Oh, come on, don't dwell on the why. So the direct approach didn't pan out. Those windshields were elusive. That's when we added a twist, literally, attaching the eggs to threads. Slowly, we lowered them down from above and... Splat! Katie chimed in, a cheeky grin on her face. Mark shot her a frustrated glare, a hint of annoyance flickering within his eyes. He had been just about to reach the climax of his story, only for it to be snatched away. Exactly, he conceded, rolling his eyes but with the corners of his lips twitching, struggling to suppress an emerging grin. Angelique stared at the object in her hand, the makeshift landmine resembling a lethal lollipop. And how exactly is a driver not going to notice this? That's the beauty of it. The string is actually an electronic switch this time. Mark's fingers danced nimbly over a small, inconspicuous box in his hand before pressing a button with decisive flair. Without warning, one of Mark's sinister creations plummeted from the ceiling, forcing Angelique and Katie to recoil in surprise. The ominous device dangled there, a silent herald of potential mayhem. The two women exchanged a glance, their eyes widened in a blend of alarm and intrigue, then turned their gaze back to Mark, seeking an explanation for the unexpected demonstration. Angelique squinted at the peculiar lollipop trap swinging before her eyes. Is that a real mine? She inquired, her tone disbelief. Mark cleared his throat conspicuously, turning aside to fiddle with another gadget as he replied, No. The unconvincing tone did nothing to reassure. Katie and Angelique exchanged a look, their eyebrows raised in stunned amusement at his blatant recklessness. They both silently wondered how he had managed to keep all his limbs intact thus far, given his fondness for improvisational explosive confections. Marx extended an object towards them bearing a striking resemblance to a ballerina dancer's leotard, albeit without the flouncy skirt, and appeared denser, equipped with headphones and an elastic wrap. Angelique's brows knitted together in puzzlement as she pointed at the odd ensemble. What is all that for? She queried, her gaze oscillating between the strange attire and marks, awaiting an explanation. Protection. When you press this button, a shockwave of epic proportions will course through the tunnel. From what you've described, the only refuge available seems to be a ventilation shaft. Where do you hypothesize the pressure will be more potent, in the large shaft or the small one? Marks explained, an air of gravity to his voice. Small shaft, Katie ventured hesitantly, a tone of uncertainty weaving through her words. The eyes of Katie and Angelique volleyed between each other and Marks, trying to ascertain if they had conjectured correctly, while Marks immersed himself in tinkering with the items in his hands. So, were we correct? Angelique inquired after a prolonged silence, her curiosity getting the better of her. Marks lifted his shoulders in a casual shrug. How would I know? I'm just the guy who used to dangle eggs in front of cars for amusement. His response was drenched in levity, creating an amusing contrast with the serious nature of their mission. Not wanting to waste any more precious seconds, Angelique inquired, How many do you have ready? 5, Marks replied succinctly. Angelique reached for the protective suit, eager to don it. All right then, load them up and let's get going. She was ready to face the danger, to be the one at the epicenter when the infernal Lollypop detonated. Wait. Marks's voice halted her in her tracks. Turning back around, Angelique raised an eyebrow. What? Marks elaborated, explaining that he had only one suit, and it was far too small to accommodate Angelique's taller frame. His gaze then shifted to Katie, implicitly suggesting that she would be a better fit for the protective gear. Angelique raised her hand in protest. No, we'll find someone else to do it. Why? Katie interjected, stepping forward to confront Angelique. I'm here. The suit will fit, and we don't have that much time. Every supply truck that makes it through just brings more supplies to those assholes. Determined, Katie gripped the suit tighter and locked eyes with Angelique, asserting firmly, I got this. Angelique let out a deep breath after seeing the same fervor in Katie's eyes that she herself harbored at Katie's age, and relented, then relaxed her grip on the suit. She turned back to Marks and instructed, Load up what you need. She's right. We move out as soon as she's finished suiting up. In no time, they managed to hustle, loading a heavy-duty truck with essential gear and plowing it down the tunnel system. The trio was left to marvel at the mesmerizing architecture of the tunnels and the way it played tricks on their perception of time, altering it in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Finally, reaching the junction, Katie pointed out the ventilation shaft where she had hidden to Marks. He inspected it thoroughly and then made some quick mental calculations. We need to place this at least 300 yards down the tunnel. Otherwise, the heat from the blast could be too intense for you, Marks elucidated to Katie, before delving into a brief rundown of the mechanics and effects of an explosion. Thanks for the science lesson, but we might have a supply convoy coming at any time. Can we get a move on? Katie interjected, her sense of urgency, a sentiment shared by Angelique. Over the next hour, they labored diligently, drilling holes in the tunnel ceiling above the highway. Marks marveled at the rock's density, speculating aloud about it having been superheated as he manipulated the hammer drill. With Angelique aiding him, they hoisted the devices into position as Marks secured them. Angelique, her curiosity mixed with a pragmatic realization, questioned, Won't this just bring the tunnel down? Either way, it's a win. Marks, pausing momentarily, looked at the seemingly precarious structure surrounding them. The sound of the drill still echoed in the confined space, a reminder of the delicate balance they tread between victory and cataclysm. Marks, with a tone of uncertain assurance, stated, It's not likely considering the tunnel's construction method. He seemed reflective, acknowledging silently that he didn't actually know how it was constructed. Also, he added, the explosion isn't directed into the rock, but rather into the vehicles themselves. The gases from the explosion will dissipate down the tunnels. He informed them tersely. Okay, arming the mines now. With all 5 devices placed side by side, Mark stepped back, scanning the ceiling with his flashlight. The 5 diabolical lollipops clung there, suspended, waiting patiently for their chance to descend and unleash their chaotic flavor of destruction. The air was dense with anticipation and unspoken apprehensions, and the silence was nearly unimaginable, broken only by the occasional echo of distant sounds through the intricate tunnel network. "One last thing!" Marks's voice echoed as he seized something from the truck and sprinted down the tunnel. "Where in the world is he going?" Angelique queried, her flashlight beam slicing through the dark to follow his diminishing figure. They watched him, a silhouette against the dim light, engrossed in some task for a few minutes before he retraced his steps. As he returned, their flashlights illuminated what appeared to be a red reflector from the spot he had just left. "What's that for?" Katie inquired, her brow furrowing in the dim light. "That's your cue to push the button," Marks explained briskly. "All the other reflectors are yellow. When you see the red one light up, press the button. The lollipops will drop and... kaboom!" Katie's eyes glinted with a sense of thrill. "Awesome," she replied, her tone laden with excitement, the reality of the ensuing explosion casting shadows in her mind. Ensuring every component was in place, the team prepared for the next phase of their mission. The tension in the tunnel seemed to tighten around them as they took their respective positions. Angelique had initially wanted to be at the center of the action, but the size of the protective suit prevented her from taking on that role. Instead, she found herself assisting Katie. With careful hands, she helped Katie secure the hearing protection, ensuring the elastic bandage was wrapped snugly around her head, holding the protectors in place. Their eyes met, a silent exchange of trust passing between them. Taking a deep breath, Katie turned and began her climb into the air shaft, each movement calculated. Angelique watched with concern, her fingers crossed for the success of their daring plan. Angelique and Marks repositioned the truck back into the sheltering darkness of the Jefferson City tunnel, a tense silence wrapping around them as they settled into a vigil. Time, already an elusive entity within the tunnels, stretched on, the void unperturbed by any movement. Inside her protective cocoon, Katie could feel a humid discomfort encroaching, her own body heat beginning to prickle against her skin in an uncomfortable contrast to the tunnel's chill. It felt like being trapped within a feverish bubble, her skin dampening from the accumulating moisture. An hour rolled into the next, the monotony nibbling at her resolve, prompting thoughts of abandonment. Yet just as she was teetering on the brink of calling it quits, a subtle shift in the oppressive darkness pricked her senses. Every hint of discomfort receded into the background as her hand instinctively tightened around the trigger of the devilish lollipop, her senses sharpening. Cautiously, she maneuvered herself, allowing just her head to peer out from her concealment within the shaft, eyes homing in on the approaching lights distantly flickering in the tunnel. Adrenaline coursing through her veins was a silent roar, heightening her senses as she steeled herself, her focus intensified on the encroaching gleam of headlights in the inky blackness. Anticipation threaded through every nerve as she dangled her arm, the trigger gripped firmly within her hand. Katie's eyes were fixated on the subtle gleam of lights as they kissed the mile markers in the tunnel, creating transient flickers in the shadows. Each one was a prelude, a ticking countdown to the one she awaited. Her heart raced, a turbulent drum within her chest, as the desired marker snapped into view, bathed in a crimson hue. Without hesitation, her fingers pressed the button, unleashing the lollipop into the abyss below. Swiftly she recoiled into the relative safety of the shaft, her breath held in a tight grip of anticipation. Seconds mutated into what seemed like minutes, a stretch of time marked by tense silence, each tick raising the shadow of doubt in her mind. It gnawed at her resolve, compelling her to peer over the edge to assess the situation, when suddenly, a seismic shift in pressure shoved her back, barricading her within the confines of the shaft. The detonation reverberated through her bones, muted yet very noticeable through her protective gear. A seemingly endless cascade of scorching gases invaded her space, prompting frantic movements to shield any trace of exposed skin, her mind reeling in the wake of the fiery tempest unleashed below. Once the massive shockwave had dispersed, a veil of anxious silence cloaked Angelique and Marks, hidden within the truck just around the bend of the junction. Visions of Katie's safety besieged their minds, infusing the air with a tangible tension. Without a word exchanged, the truck roared to life, propelled by the unanimous urgency filling their hearts, and sped towards the junction, halting just beneath the vent where Katie had orchestrated the explosive symphony. Their gazes, filled with concern, raced skywards, scouring the shaft for any sign of her among the lingering echoes of devastation and darkness, waiting for the reassurance that she had withstood the storm unscathed. No sooner had they halted when a resonant thud reverberated through the truck's frame, causing both Angelique and Marks to startle. Holy hell! Talk about bringing it down! Did you see that? Katie's voice, laced with exhilaration, pierced the thick silence, her figure emerging amid steam and the haunting glow of a burning truck behind her. Angelique, her heart racing, swiftly leapt from the truck, her eyes scanning Katie. "Are you okay?" "Never better!" Katie exclaimed, her tone bursting with adrenaline. From the driver's seat, Marks, his voice steeped with caution, "We need to leave now. The air is about to turn noxious." They exchanged quick glances before boarding the truck, feeling the adrenaline still coursing through their veins as they sped away from the smoldering chaos, leaving the toxic ambience and the consuming fire in their wake.